Okay, so our very first talk today, many of you know him, Mr. Adam Jacob from Chef. He is the CTO there. And I have to tell you real quick how we came about this talk. So if y'all don't know Adam, he is, first and foremost, I think, in my own words, a thinker. He just is a great philosopher. He thinks, and he's just constantly philosophizing. And he was at ChefConf, and he gave a keynote where I literally just wrote this sentence down that he said because I thought, I want to know more about that. And it's not even a complete sentence. It's like a sentence fragment. But he talked about the future of enterprise when technology mimics the way we interact as people, a community of intention. And I wrote that down, and I thought, ooh, I want to know what he thinks about that. So we asked him to do Keynote, and I said, hey, do you have a topic yet? And I said, an idea, just an idea. What about a community of intention, the future of enterprise? And he said, ooh, yeah, I want to hear that talk. And so that's the talk today. So I'm super excited about it. Also, before he comes up, you might have noticed the lovely Ashton Rodenheiser over here, who is illustrating. So as Mr. Adam talks about the future of enterprise, she's going to be taking illustrative notes over here, and we are going to look and see what she has come up with at the end of his talk. So I'm super excited about that. But don't be too distracted by her, but also, it's pretty cool. So also, another reminder, please silence your phones because it drives me crazy. And I'll call you out. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to call you out, but your phone will call you out. Get it? Okay, without any further ado, everybody, let's give a round of applause for Mr. Adam Jacob.
Thank you, Annie. Hang on a second while I unlock my screensaver. That's going to end super badly, just as a thing between us as friends. Hi. Let's make sure the clicker clicks. Oh, it super does. Okay. Hi, I'm Adam. It's nice to see everybody. You made it. You're in the morning. You had breakfast. Did you eat that chorizo bean thing? Who had that? Wasn't that good? That's Texas. I like it here. Okay, so let's shake it off a little bit. Can you guys stand up? Everybody stand up. All right, how's that feel? Is that better? I gotta jump up and down because do you guys ever give talks? Do you ever give speeches and stuff? It's super nerve-wracking every time, and I was supposed to be stretching, but I was listening to Annie. So we're gonna do that a little. Let's do the wave. So why not? Let's start over here. So you're gonna go, oh my gosh, there we go. It's all the way over there. Oh no, it's coming back this way. Oh, it's so nerve-wracking. Okay, go back that way. One more time. Okay, now we've exceeded the rules of threes and it won't be funny anymore. Sit down. Okay. Okay, everybody's cool? All right, so my name is Adam. I'm the CTO at Chef. And I want to talk a little bit about how I think the future of both the enterprise and of DevOps and of technology is going to work. So let's do that. First up, I think it's worth spending a minute to talk about why we do the things we do. So when we talk about being in technology, when we talk about DevOps, when we talk about all these things, in the end, we're building this technology theoretically so that other people can use it, right? To get some benefit. If you're a bank, you build technology so that people can bank, right? I build technology so that people can build technology so that they can bank, right? And that ability to focus in on who our customers are and what they need is really central to all of the things that we do. But how many people in here spend their day feeling like what they do is totally disconnected from the actual thing that human beings who don't work at your company do with you? Disconnected from the actual business. Only 4 of us. You're liars. Texas is full of liars. Okay, so it's way more than 4 of you, right? Maybe not. Maybe you're all just perfect and your businesses are great, but you are at a DevOpsDays, so I'm thinking you're not. Okay, so when we talk about that infrastructure problem and all the time that we spend doing all this work behind the scenes, I think it's worth saying that it's too much, right? It's still too much. It's too difficult. It's too hard to figure out how to deliver that value all the way to our customers, how to go from some idea in your head to a running change that a consumer can use. And it doesn't matter if you're an internal IT and your customers are the business, or if you're an application developer and your customers are all the way at the end of your business, at the end of your value chain. There's just too much stuff between you and them. And if we want to get really good at it, we need to build high-performing teams, right? These high-performing teams come together, and they work really hard to get an idea from conception all the way through to delivery. And it's true for everybody, for all of our customers, for everything we do. And every single one of those teams runs into what I like to call the production cliff. And so let's talk about it for a second. I drew this sketch. Obviously, it's a J.W. Marriott there. So, but here's what happens. You pick up a new piece of technology. Let's call it Chef, because that way I'm picking on myself instead of Docker. I could totally pick on Docker too, or I could pick on whatever. You could give me a name. But here's what happens. You pick up a new piece of technology, and you're like, wow, this will change everything, right? How many people have done that? Yeah, right? Okay, so you're stoked. You use it, you're like, this changes the game. I'm going to fix it all. And you start to use it, and you like build a little prototype, and your prototype is dope, right? And you show it to people, and they're like, that is amazing. This changes everything. And you're like, I know. And then you keep going, and you build the technology, and people start to get stoked, and you're like, we're going to fix it. It's going to be better. And then you build, and you build, and you build, and you get to what I call the peak of false hope. And that's right there. And the peak of false hope is the moment where all the potential of the thing is in front of you, and none of the production reality of running that thing have hit you yet, right? So you're like, you've built it in a lab, and it's super working, and now you're going to go big, and you're going to deploy it, and you're going to fix the problems of the enterprise. You know what I'm talking about? How many people run that project? You got that big old enterprise architecture domain model? Yeah, you're going to fix it all. So you get there, and you're like, oh. So then what happens is you start to go down. And that dip there is the production, is the beginning before the production cliff. So you actually dip down, you're like, oh, it's getting worse. But then you're like, but it's going to be okay. It can get, and then like you have 6 months of hate and pain and terror, right? Or a year or 2 years, right? Where all the things that were good about the technology you chose, operationally, they just destroy you forever. So I want to talk a little bit and illustrate this point with this video game. This is a video game. It's called Dark Souls 3. Does anybody play Dark Souls? Yeah, I know some of you do. Right on. Okay, so for those of you who don't play video games or haven't played Dark Souls, the thing you need to know about Dark Souls is this game is really hard. Like stupid, ridiculous hard. And I'll use a story. So I'm this dude here with the little knight guy, and then that guy with the red cape is not like a special boss. He's not like a big hard guy. He's just like he's like the Mario equivalent of a single mushroom. Like he's just a dude, right, who walks around. That freaking guy murdered me for like a week. Like I would walk up to him and he would stab me in the face and I just died. And I'd be like, oh, and then I would do it again. And he'd stab me in the face, I would die. And I would just, but I wanted to kill him so much. Like I wanted to figure out, like, how do I stab this goddamn knight, you know? And so I was up late at night. I was obsessed, right? My family's asleep. I got to go to work in the morning. It's like 2:30 in the morning. I should be in bed. It's my 100th try killing this knight. And I do it. He dies. And I like shouted out loud. I jumped up. I was like, yes! I felt as good in the moment I killed that freaking knight as I did when my child was born. Right? I'm not even kidding. It was so awesome. It was so good. And I was just like, yes! And as soon as that happened, everything about that, like I love that game. I will always remember that moment where I triumphed over that knight and all of the difficulty. And then the game opened up and I was good at it and it was cool and it was super fun and you should totally play it and you will hate me for the advice. But it's kind of worth it because we love things that are hard. When we triumph over stuff that's hard, you get a rush about it, right? You're like, yeah, I've got skills. Like I learned, it was hard, I learned it. I clawed my way to victory, right? And so part of the problem here with how difficult everything we do in infrastructure and in IT is that we get rewarded for the difficulty, right? If I do something hard, I did a hard thing. I built a configuration management platform that runs a bunch of enterprises. Now I get to come on a stage and tell you guys how easy it could be if only you would follow these 12 steps. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you do what I say, it's all going to be good, right? And look, it was super hard to build a configuration management system, and it was really hard to get all the knowledge that I needed to do that. And because I triumphed over that super hard thing, I get to be here doing this, and you are stuck listening to me. And but I'm not talking about, the Dark Souls story is funny, and it's a video game, and I enjoyed it, and it was great. But I'm not really talking about that kind of hard. When we talk about this in our jobs, this is that like gut-wrenching, I'm not going to get promoted, and my kids can't go to private school, or they can't have shoes feeling. Do you know what I mean? It's that like, I'm up too late, and I have another production outage, and my wife has been mad at me for 2 weeks, and she's going to leave me if I get paged one more time, right? It's that thing that I'm talking about, right? One more illustration. How many people have said you hate software in the last 30 days? You've said, I hate whatever, Chef, stupid Chef. I hate its stupid face, right? Okay, how about 60 days? People said in the last 60 days. 90 days? How many people haven't raised their hand? Once again, Texas, liars. Liars, you've totally said you hate a piece of software sometime in the last 90 days. You know you have. And I just want you to think about that in any other part of your life. Like, if you woke up every day and were like, I hate my kitchen, stupid kitchen, like, you would fix it. Do you know what I mean? Like, you would find a way. You'd be like, I'm buying a new microwave. I hate this microwave. It's a dumb microwave. And you would fix your problems. But we don't. In software, we go, we dig in, we go through this difficult thing, and then we triumph over the top of it, and then we give speeches encouraging other people to also brutalize themselves and ruin their relationships. Good times. Okay, so I'm going to tell a story. Let's make it a little more lighthearted. There's a Zen story, and it's about a man, and he's on a horse. And he's galloping along, and he comes to a crossroads, and at the crossroads, he sees his friend. And his friend looks up at the man, and he shouts, hey, where are you going? And the man shouts back, I don't know, ask the horse. You get it? All right, it's a Zen story, so you can chuckle a little, but not too much. Okay, so in this story, the horse is technology, right? It's going wherever it wants to go, right? If containers are where we're going to containers. If the cloud is where we're going to the cloud. If it's IoT, we're going to IoT. We're not making decisions. We're not actively choosing to let these things into our lives or make these choices. Technology is going where technology is going, and we, my friends, are on the horse. This is Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh is one of my heroes. He's a Vietnamese Buddhist monk. He was kicked out of Vietnam during the Vietnam War, and he wrote letters back to his fellow monks talking about how to remain mindful in the midst of the war. And you can read this book. It's called The Miracle of Mindfulness. It's a lovely book. Google had this, probably the greatest living master of mindfulness meditation on the planet, come to Google and give a talk, because Google. And this is what he said. He said, if technology can help you to go home to yourself and take care of your anger, take care of your despair, take care of your loneliness, if technology helps you to create joyful feelings, happy feelings for yourself and for your loved ones, it's going in a good way, and you can make good use of technology. And what I think he is talking about is that we should take control of that horse. We should sit with our own representation of ourselves and our values and the lives we want to live, and we should use the technology that we build for ourselves and for other people to enrich our lives, to solve those problems, not to make it worse, right? Not to give ourselves those moments of doubt and pain and relationship-wrecking disaster. And instead, we should grab hold of that technology, and we should build things that are fundamentally good and right for us as people and as human beings. And so I think the future of the enterprise is actually in building a humane enterprise. It's building an enterprise, building companies, building software that reflect what it means to be human, that shows compassion and benevolence, that is kind and considerate and understanding, and that is intended to civilize us, to refine us, to make us better, to solve the problems that we have, not just as technologists, but as human beings and as people. And we won't do it by just blindly repeating where we have been in the past. If we just look back at the standard of technology and all the things that we've built over time, that's what led us to the state we're in, where we go through that Dark Souls moment every time we pick a piece of software, right? And how many people have been through that moment with my software? Kind of some of you have, right? Thank you, people who didn't raise your hand. Also, I got you. We have this, but that history does give us perspective. It gives us history. It gives us a point of view where we can look back on the technology choices we've made and how they made us feel and how they served us as people. And we can invent a new future that takes the best of where we have been and the best of the things that we have learned, and really does actually strive to be more humane. And I think it starts here. So there are two real components to technology. So one is the culture itself. So there's what the people around us do. So culture is the things we do every day and how we talk to each other. And then there's the technology, the actual technical part, and they form like a symbiotic circle. So if we change the culture, then we might change the tooling so that our tooling then reinforces our cultural behaviors, right? So if you only, here's an example, email. Everybody has email, right? And so your culture starts to reflect your use of email. You wind up with an email culture where like, oh, I'm mad at Frank. So I will write Frank an angry email. And you're like, boop, 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 boop. And then you send it to Frank, and Frank reads it, and he does a thing, and then he comes back, and he's like, I don't like you either, you know? And you talk. But you never actually talk. You just did it over email because you had an email culture, right? The technology enabled that interaction in that way. Now you get Slack. So Slack shows up, and now we can chat with each other. And so now we all stop using email. We're like, email's for suckers. And now our culture is now fundamentally different. When I'm mad at you, I hop up, and you get a little I am window, and it's like, I am mad at you, poop emoji, you know? And our culture is changed. The technology has moved the sort of culture wheel. But again, were we intentional about it, right? How much should we think about what we should build and why? I think when we talk about building companies or anything really, I think there's an order to things. So I think if you take care of your people, if you build a system that's good for the human beings, those people have a shot at building great products. So you have a chance of building something that's worth using. And then if you build a great product, you have a shot at being a company or a sustaining entity that is good for other people. But if it starts with people. So if the culture you build inside your company is a garbage culture, right, that hurts people and runs them through the mill, doesn't enable them to grow and learn, then the results of that will be bad product outcomes, right? Good culture, better product outcomes. Bad culture, worse product outcomes. So where do we start? If this is where we need to be, what do we do first? And so I submit that we should start with ourselves. We should start with what's inside of all of us. And there's a concept called Ubuntu that I think really succinctly gets to the point. And it is this: I am because you are. And when you suffer, I suffer. And when you thrive, I thrive. So when we think about building our DevOps practice, or we think about building our new enterprise, or we think about building our companies, this is the place, the spirit that we need to start from. All of our decisions should be rooted here, right? Which is the thing I'm doing right now making life better? Is it better for me? Is it better for other people? Or am I contributing to that Dark Souls moment? You know, am I making sure that you suffer just a little bit more, right? And if we start from this place, then we can grow to inclusion. So we can say, okay, if my work is about making things better for other people, for myself, for all the human beings that I touch, how do I make sure that scope of humanity is big enough, right? And that's what inclusion is all about. And Jay Gooseby Smith wrote a great book that happens to also be rooted in the spirit of Ubuntu. It's called, and she talks about this idea of Ubuntu inclusion, and she has 12 things. I have to go over here because I can't see the slides at my feet. So the first one is we need to start with being connected. So you need to give people or yourselves a sense that the work they do is bigger than just setting up a mail server or writing a class or using Chef, right? It has to be about something bigger than that. The second is that it's an intrapersonal thing. It's a mutual act. I can't include you if you don't want to be included, right? It has to go both ways. It has to be covered with communication. We have to talk to each other a lot about what's happening, what's going on, how we feel. We need to mentor people into that culture and into our system. So we need to find people, we need to give them context and help them grow. We need to care about those people because not everything is going to be perfect and it's going to be really hard. And so we need to set up systems of caring that allow people to get what they need when they need it. We need to have work-life balance and be fair. You know, and here's an interesting thing. How many people have more than 2 weeks of paid vacation? How many people have 12 weeks of fully paid paternity and maternity leave? Right? Isn't that a crime? Like, everybody who raised their hand, if they have a kid, they get to stay home for 12 weeks and get paid. And you don't. And that's weird, because I think you should love your kids the same way they do, right? How is that an inclusive culture, right? If that works for us because we're highly paid technology workers, what about baristas? What about the guy who was making coffee downstairs? If he has a kid, should he get to stay home for 12 weeks and take care of his kids? I think he should, but he doesn't. And so how can we say that our culture is an inclusive one until those things are true, right? Visibility. You need to give people a chance to rise up in the organization and take risks and have high stakes, right? And then finally, they need to allow people to be external. They need to be the face of your project or the things that you do, right? And so inclusion can't just be, you can come and do this thing for me and I can hog all the credit, right? We have to actually let people rise up and go out into the world and become the face of the organization. And if we start with inclusion, that's the soil that leads us to diversity, right? So we often talk about diversity as like an initiative or a thing we can run, but the truth is, it starts with inclusion, and then if I get to a place where the soil is rich, then many different kinds of things can come and be planted in that soil and grow, right? But if you don't have an inclusive culture, you can try to get some diversity, but what you'll get is none of the benefits of diversity, where what you're really looking for is diversity of experience and of thought and of background, and like you want this richness to be there. And when your culture's not inclusive, but it might be diverse, what happens is the culture still remains sort of the same, right? It's kind of homogenous. It just has different kinds of people in it, which isn't really what we mean. And if what we're doing is building software for people in an incredibly global society, if our companies and our work doesn't reflect the full richness of those people, how can we claim to know if we're serving them correctly, right? Because I have no idea who you are, and I have no idea what your experience is like. So diversity matters when we think about building an enterprise that will really work in the future. The future of the enterprise is oriented into teams, not individuals. So we as human beings, we need each other to succeed. Cooperation is literally a thing that's built into our DNA over time. And we want to form groups, we want to build teams, we want to go out into the world and do stuff together. And so when we build cultures that are team-oriented, where the teams win, and the team is what goes out and tackles problems, and those teams are enabled and empowered, things work better than when we have sort of lone wolf experts. My career is systems administration for 20 years, and for probably 10 of 20, I was mostly alone, right? Like maybe I had a team. We didn't work like one, right? Like I had my 100 servers, I took care of them. If you had a problem, you called me, right? Or I had my 1,000 servers, whatever it was. And then eventually we evolved into a culture that actually did have some teamwork, but that took a long time. And like, you know, how many people were the lone wolf sysadmin or like the sole coder on a project, right? It's awful. It's a terrible job. Some people really like it, but most of us don't. Okay, so once we're team-oriented, those teams need context to thrive. So if we want a team to be really good, that team needs to understand why what they do matters in the context of the job that we need to go through. So I'm going to explain the importance of context and why using context for teams is so important. So this is my family. That's my wife there, and that's my daughter, Elizabeth. My wife's name is Katie. And I live in California, and so we went to Six Flags in the Bay Area, and it was my daughter's first trip to an amusement park. She'd never been to one, and so she was stoked. And so we walk in, it was I don't know how many of you have been to Northern California, but it never gets really hot. It was like, you know, like most days, it's like somewhere between 65 and 72, right? And it's just, that's every day. And it was sunny for most of it, but then sometimes it was overcast. And when it gets overcast, the temperature drops really fast. And so we're in this park, and it was sunny when we left, but then like the cloud cover kind of came in, and the temperature dropped like 5 degrees. And in the middle of this park, there's this humongous water ride that is like a big roller coaster with a crazy drop and a big splash. And my daughter was like, yes, I want to go on that. And I don't know how many of you have kids, but she was 6. And like, you don't tell a 6-year-old she can't go on the water slide because the temperature dropped. Do you know what I mean? Like, you go on the water slide. So I was like, all right, let's do it. We're going on the water. It's going to be awesome. Going on a water ride. She's like, yeah, never been on a water ride. I'm super scared. And I'm like, I'm scared too. That's why it's fun. And she was like, it is fun to be scared. And I'm like, I know. And so we get on the thing, and we're on the water slide, and it like takes your picture, and you come down the thing, and we're all like, woo! And we get wet, super wet. Not just a little wet. Like, the whole front of me is soaked all the way down. And the only part that's dry is my back. And I'm not a little, like, I'm really wet. My daughter's soaking wet. She was like, that was so fun. We're super wet. And I'm like, yeah, it was great. So glad we came to Six Flags. And I don't like getting wet or dirty. I now know because I have kids. Anyway, so then these bastards, they built a bridge over the part where the water slide comes down so that when you walk out of the ride, it can get you again. And if you have a 6-year-old, you know that your 6-year-old doesn't just like walk anywhere. They're like, ooh, because everything's new. And so she's like, gets to the middle of this bridge, and she's like, this is awesome. I can see the log ride. And I was walking in front of her, and so I saw that she was about to get destroyed again. And I turned around like a fool and went to rescue her, you know? And so I picked her up, and the entire back of me gets destroyed, right? She's perfectly dry. She wouldn't have cared if she got wet. She just thought it was fun. I'm the idiot that decided I had to protect her. And so I'm soaking wet. It's cold. We're freezing. She's like, we're really cold. And they built this like human like hair dryer that you go in. And I tried to dry myself. This just did not work. And so my wife was like, I'm just going to go buy us some clothes because this is like a fool's errand. So my wife goes out and she buys us these dope shirts. I got like this crazy wolf and whatever that cartoon character is because it was a Six Flags, not Disney, so it's not actually cool. And it was a great day. And here's the thing. Now that I've told you that story, if you were to go out somewhere else and see this picture, you would be able to tell a stranger what this story was about. You might not remember the details. You don't remember my wife's name. You won't remember me. But you'll remember that you saw this slide at a DevOps Days in Texas, and the story was about how I got soaking wet in a water slide and had to buy a wolf shirt, right? And that's context, right? That's the difference. So think about the difference between knowing this story and looking at that picture and then looking at a 35-page design document, right? How much context comes in a 35-page design document? No context, none, right? But if I talk to you, if I see your face, if we look at each other and we have small cues that tell us what our future is, now we can work together really well and effectively as a team. Okay, I gotta hurry up. You need to embrace complexity. So people often talk about things being simpler. How many people have said that they think it should be simpler? Okay, you're wrong. And I will illustrate why this is true. So simple things are not necessarily better. In fact, most of the best parts of civilization are deeply complex and have been built up over a long period of time to get to the place where they're as simple as they are. And so embracing complexity is an incredibly important thing that we need to be able to do in our job and do it artfully. And I'm going to use a little story problem for an example. Who here can drive a car? You live in Texas. You should all be able to drive. So this is a Ford Model T. And raise your hand if you think you could drive a Ford Model T. All right. You, come up here with me. Yeah, you. Come on up. Okay. So we're going to start a Ford Model T, you and I. And I'll help you out with a couple of first steps. Is that cool? All right, so step 1, we're going to prime the carburetor. So to do this, we're going to pull the choke and engage the crank lever. So if we had a Ford Model T right here, where do you think the choke would be? He said, hopefully it's on the dash. No, sir. That would be complicated. The choke is close to where the choke belongs. It's under the car. There's a little like piece of wire with an end, and you have to fish around in the bottom of the car and then find that wire, and you can pull it out just a little bit, right? Like halfway, but not all the way. If you pull it all the way out, then it'll fully open, and the car will flood, and it'll never start, and you have no way to see it. It's just literally you find a wire and just got to do it by feel. Just got to guess. There's nothing that stops you. Okay, so then you got to get in the car. You set the ignition to magneto, the timing stalk up, the throttle down, and the handbrake up. Now, the handbrake you would think sets the brake. It does not. In this particular configuration, the handbrake, I don't know exactly what it does, but apparently it's part of engaging the engine so that it can start. I don't know what's going on. But now we're going to start the engine. So how do you think you start the engine in a Ford Model T? What do you do?
Does it have one of those cranks in the front?
It super does, yeah. So come over here so people can see you. And show me how you turn that crank. Just turn the crank for me. Hey, we've got a Ford Model T, it's right here. Yeah, you're going to grab. Yeah, so here's, boom, you broke your arm. Cheers. Okay, so here's the problem. So the Ford Model T has this crank on it, right? And you turned that crank like a human being. So just for the record, you did nothing wrong. That's exactly what I would expect you to do. You grip a thing with your hand, right? So one problem, you're right-handed. Yep, so that's a mistake. So if the engine backfires, it's going to rotate in a way that if you're right-handed and you're in the swing, it'll break your arm. So it's a huge bummer, and people broke their arm all the time. Second problem, you're like, okay, great, I'll use my left hand, right? Which seems rational. So you decide to use your left hand. Your new problem is that you have a thumb, and you use your thumb to hold things. You gotta let it fly out of your hand. You see, otherwise you'll keep holding on to it when it happens. And so you actually needed to grip that crankshaft without using your thumb, so that if it backfires, it flies away gracefully, and you do like a Who style windmill. Okay, so this is our friend. Thank you so much. You broke your arm. Let's give him a hand. Okay, but here's the thing about this story. If there was a pile of Ford Model T parts on this stage right here, and I locked those doors, and I put armed guards outside, we would leave this room today with a working Ford Model T, right? Just with the knowledge we have in this room, I am almost certain we could get a working Ford Model T and drive out of this room together, right? That car was simple. It was blindingly simple. Nothing could be simpler than a Ford Model T, right? Because I don't know about you, but I know almost nothing about building cars, but I'm pretty sure we could build one of those. So here's the thing. It wasn't better, right? It was hard to use. It was simple, but that simple was difficult. Remember earlier, we like difficult things. So the first people who got Ford Model Ts, it was way harder than a wagon, right? People using a wagon were like, why do you want this complicated car, right? But the truth was, it was better. It got made some things easier, right? And so if we can trade complexity for ease, we should do it almost every time, right? If something's going to get, if what we're doing is getting more complicated so something can be easier to use or easier to operate or easier to maintain, that's a choice we should make. This is my car. It's an Audi, and it has a button in it to start the car, and it says start, which I think is easier, right? Than I'm never going to break my arm pushing that button, right? But if my car was distilled to parts and the doors were locked and we were trapped in this room, we die here, right? We turn to cannibalism before we're going to get that Audi working in this place, right? That's my point. So when we build these systems, we need to strive to make them maintainable, right? So when things go wrong, and they absolutely will, we have to design in advance for how we're going to repair and fix those systems. Maintainability is a thing we have to build into everything we do from the start. This is a race car. Race cars are awesome, but this is a NASCAR. It's a stock car. And what's great about stock cars is they're the same as the car you could go buy on the lot. That's a Ford Fusion. You could go buy a Ford Fusion. You could drive it off the lot. It's basically the identical car that they're racing in that racetrack. And they can change the tires on that car in seconds. They can retune the engine with a computer. They can do all of that stuff. It's designed to be maintainable. Okay, we have to not be afraid to go deep into our problems. So often we stop shallow, right? We decide, a good example here, I built a thing called Habitat that's an application supervisor. And one of my requirements for this thing was that it had to be able to deploy applications automatically without any infrastructure being deployed. So I wanted to be able to do a rolling update of servers without any infrastructure to coordinate them. And so my first pass at this didn't meet that requirement. Instead, I just used etcd, or I used console. And that was fine, it worked, but it was kind of a bummer, because in order to run your application, you had to set up this service, and I didn't want that to be true. And so I was being a little afraid, because there's sort of two things you're not supposed to do. So you're not supposed to write your own encryption, and you're not supposed to build distributed systems unless you're really, really smart. And I didn't think I was smart enough to do it. And this guy, John Gossman at Microsoft, was like, well, you should fix this usability problem by just building a gossip layer into the thing. Like, you should just do it yourself, and it would be better. And John was right. But in order to do that, I had to go, read 30 years of research about how to build distributed gossip protocols, right? And I needed to put all this stuff in my head, but But I didn't do it initially because I was just afraid. I just had convinced myself I wasn't smart enough or good enough or honestly smart enough to be able to be the person who wrote that kind of code. And I am now because I went and I did that work. And you shouldn't be afraid to do that work either, so don't talk yourself out of it. That said, we have to stay grounded in reality. How many times have you heard a project where the scope of it is, we are going to change everything about the way we deploy the bank? The entire bank is going to run in the public cloud, and it's going to run on containers in 2 years. How many people have heard that pitch? I know some of you made that pitch with Chef. How's that going? You should still pay me, though. Shelly's over there. Okay. We can help. Look, the thing is, you got to stay grounded in the truth of your own business and in the things that you do. So just because you're willing to go deep and you can explore and do crazy things doesn't mean that crazy things are always what you should do. Sometimes you need to be practical and make changes where you can. We have a long history of principles in computer science and in operations, and you need to learn about those principles and use them to your best benefit. The thing about principles is that they transcend implementation. So containers are a great example of this. I love containers. They're so great, especially the principle of immutability, where we say that we should have an immutable artifact that we deploy across the entire life cycle of a service. That's a beautiful principle, and we should learn and embrace it. And then you should look at your problems, and you should decide, where can I use that principle to make my world better, right? There's a question, the container technology, and implementation of the principle of immutability, which is amazing. You may or may not be able to use a container. You can definitely build immutable artifacts, right? Okay, you have to remember your users, and I think it's an easy way to classify them as 3 buckets. So builders, operators, and consumers, and you need to build for all 3. So build for the people who are going to use what you build, who also work for the people who build it, and the people who are going to operate it. So I think we should build humane systems that start fundamentally from our own position of humanity and our own relationships to others. And I think this is more important now than it probably has ever been, and I'm going to use one last example to show you why it matters. So this is Amazon, and they bought Whole Foods. And if you work for Kroger, are you terrified, right? So the answer is yes, right? Because you look at what happened to Nordstrom, you look at what happened to Target, right? You look at what Walmart is terrified, right? Walmart's like, we could partner with Google. What, right? Because what are you even going to do? And if our big plan for competing as Kroger is work like Amazon, I got to tell you that's a bad plan, right? Because you're not Amazon, you're Kroger, and you're going to have to find your own path through through your own Krogerness. And you're going to have to find the things that are good about you, and you're going to have to figure out how you're going to build that enterprise in a way that's going to be great for you at Kroger, and that leverages what it means to be Kroger. And if your big plan is turn Kroger into Amazon, you're dead. It's never going to work because it's not what it is, and you'll have to find your own way there. And so I submit that, like this woman, we got to ride the horse. Like, we got to pick that technology up. And the time to do it is now. We have to get cracking. Because someday soon, we're not going to be talking about data centers and cloud. We're going to be talking about shoes. And so how long do you think it'll be before Nike launches the first smart shoe? And it's going to give coaching through your phone to a little Bluetooth ear thing. And as you run, it's going to give you updates. It's going to be like, your stride is too long, you know? And you're going to be like, that was crazy. And they're going to be like, you're striking with too much force. It will hurt your knees in 20 years, right? And you'd be like, oh, these shoes are so smart, you know? And you're running along, and it's coaching you, and you get to every time you pass a mile, it's like, good job, you ran a mile. That is 1/128th of a marathon. And you're like, I'm killing it, right? And you love your little Siri coach, you know what I'm saying? And then you decide you're going to go on a trail run in the mountains because it's beautiful, and you get up there with your dope smart shoes, and it goes, you have run what? And you're like, these goddamn shoes! And then you look at your cell phone, and there's no connectivity, and you're like, what happened to my smart shoes? They're really dumb now, right? And so then you put your shoes in the closet, and you're like, I spent $1,000 on smart shoes. And your spouse makes fun of you, how those smart shoes doing? And like, it's not cool, right? And so the future of those smart shoes is actually going to be latency. It's going to be distribution. It's going to be being able for the shoe on the edge to talk directly to you without going up to the cloud. If to do all that machine learning good times, it has to go up to the cloud, well, like, all of a sudden, it can't give you the most vital information. It can't tell you the most interesting stuff. It'll break at the most critical moment of your life, and you know I'm telling you the truth, because tell me your phone doesn't break every time that you need it. You know what I'm talking about? Every time, right? So this means that shoes, over time, and not that far at a distance, are going to be data centers, and you're going to have to manage them exactly like one. They can be disconnected, they can have partitions, and the way we think about software and management and monitoring is going to extend to every single device in the world. So if you think the cloud is big and problematic, imagine every shoe gets managed like a data center, and tell me you're building the right infrastructure, right? Look me in the eye with a straight face and tell me you're doing it right, because you're not. None of us are. And so if we want this to work, the only example we have of a successful distributed system that works at this scale is us, is human beings, is people, right? And this is the Roots, and they're an amazing band. And what's great about the Roots is that they have a ton of different members. My favorite Roots member of all time was a guy named Tuba Gooding Jr. And Tuba Gooding Jr. played the tuba in the Roots. And like, so it was awesome. If you went to a Roots show while Tuba was in the thing, like he'd have like a tuba solo. Like he'd come out and he'd be like, I'm Tuba Gooding Jr. And you're like, wow, it was awesome, I got a tuba guy. And then Tuba Gooding Jr. like left the Roots. And we didn't, like, it's fine. You could still go to a Roots show, still the Roots, right? They knew what they were doing. And so people could come, people could go, but when the Roots play, they know what they're doing. They know their job. They're playing together. They are the Roots, right? And that's an example of a good distributed system. The Roots, they can grow, they can contract, they can show up, they can play, they can improvise. They have all kinds of intelligence, and that's the way humans work. I'm going to use one more example here. My mom had breast cancer, and she recovered, so she's fine. She had a double mastectomy, and the thing we didn't have to do was explain to anyone involved why she was at the hospital, other than to say, she has cancer. And then every single person in our life knew what to do, which is, what do I do to help you no longer have cancer, right? You would never need to go to a hospital and tell a doctor, well, should we remove the cancer? You know, like the context was all you needed, right? Just, she has cancer. And then every single person is like, what can I do? Can I bring food? Like, can I take you to the hospital? Like, her whole world sort of just went all the way around her, and all we could do to make that thing better. That's human beings, right? And that's how we work when we're at our best. And so we need to build technical systems that work that way too. That's the only way we're going to get out of that really difficult time and that really difficult crisis of that production cliff, is if our systems work like human beings help each other over cliffs. We help each other to solve those big problems, and we do it in a way when we're at our best that is reflective of our values and our core. And so you should start doing this right now in your own teams. You don't need to wait. You don't need permission from an executive. You don't need anybody. You just need yourself and the people around you, and decide that what you're going to do is be better for each other and be better for the work that you do. And don't settle for not getting it. If the people around you are hurting you, if the work environment you're in, if the technology you're using is bad, stop. And be bold. Be willing to make those changes and to do that in your own life. So if you remember one thing from this talk, it should be this. Please stand up. One more time. I just want you to repeat after me, because if you forget it all, you can remember this. Ready? I am because you are. When you suffer, I suffer. When you thrive, I thrive. Thank you, Dallas. See you later.
Thanks, Adam.